Hello my dear friends and welcome to my channel. Get yourself comfortable and prepare for some interesting stories. One of them is a story about OP who is in the emergency room with his 3-year-old daughter and a crazy woman who made a crap show. Please subscribe if you haven't, and I hope you'll enjoy it. My 3-year-old daughter was diagnosed with bacterial pneumonia and we ended up in the emergency room because she was struggling to breathe. Pneumonia is very serious. She was put on a nebulizer and O2 and given an IV for more meds while we waited for a room to open up in the PICU. The emergency room was pretty full. The rooms are small and you share them. There is a curtain that divides them. There are no doors, just another curtain. Around 4 p.m. a family arrives with mom, dad, 5-year-old daughter. The mom briefly looks on my side of the room and could see my toddler laying in the bed hooked to machines with an IV. It's obvious this isn't a stubbed toe, so I can't help but hear the parents explaining why their kid's in the ER. Stomach pain. Meanwhile, the kid is asking for something to eat. She sounds quite perky. Parents insist that she has a kidney infection. Whatever, I don't know her history, not interested. So my daughter was given a steroid through her nebulizer to help open her airways. Her O2, which they wanted 90 or above, kept dipping down below the 80s, making an alarm sound. The nebulizer makes some noise, and the side effect is hyperactivity, so my extremely sick kid was medically wired as heck. Within 30 minutes of arriving, the entitled parents call for a nurse and ask for a private room because their daughter needs to rest somewhere quiet. Meanwhile, their daughter was blasting Ryan's toy review from her tablet and loudly demanding chocolate chip cookies and milk. The nurse explains that there is no private rooms in the emergency room. My daughter then starts having a coughing fit, which is scary, as her O2 drops off and she chokes until she vomits. I had 2 nurses in trying to help by suctioning her and patting her back. I'm trying to help her. My daughter is turning blue. I hear the entitled mother ask the nurse, how long are they going to be expected to listen to that? Afterwards, my daughter was wiped out and was crying a little, and the entitled mom rang for a nurse again, and asked again for someplace quiet so her little girl can rest. Her daughter was making a lot of noise playing with something. Then they started playing with the lights. The room has a switch to control the lights on each side, and then the master switch to cut all the lights. My daughter is afraid of the dark. The entitled dad cuts the lights for the room, making it quite dark, with a curtain over the doorway drawn. I tell my wife to turn the lights on our side, which she does. The entitled mom calls their nurse to complain that it's too bright for her little girl to sleep. It's 5 p.m. The nurse explained that they are welcome to shut the lights off on their side, but they have to leave our side alone. They complain a bit about how ill their daughter is. Meanwhile, my daughter is drowning in her own lungs, which I'm sure they know as you can hear everything. Then the nurse leaves and they shut the lights off for the entire room again. My wife immediately turns ours on and calls through the curtain that we need our lights on. Silence. Our nurse comes in to attend to our daughter's IV and they attempt to get her to force us to turn the lights off. Our nurse basically tells them to knock it off. Then they start pushing for more space. They attempt to push our chair away where my wife is sitting. They put their chair way over on our side of the room, pushing the curtain into our faces essentially. My wife pushes it back. They call and complain, rinse and repeat. Finally, a room in the PICU opens up, and we are told that we would be admitted in an hour. Entitled parents complain that they asked for a private room first. The nurse explains that we are being admitted, not being given a private room in the ER. The EP demand that they be admitted first because their daughter is so much sicker. The nurse says there is no reason for their daughter to be admitted as she is just constipated, and as soon as she poops, they will be free to go. The parents start freaking out. So that's my story, how the parents of a little girl who needed to take a crap felt they were more important than a little girl with pneumonia. Edit. First of all, my daughter is doing much better. Thanks for all the well wishes. Second, many of you say you would have caused some sort of scene, or you would have acted aggressively or called them on their behavior. I worked in an emergency room for 4 years. Unruly parents were often removed from the emergency room without their child. I kept my head down and took it because the care my child was receiving to keep her heart beating was more important. Imagine that. My daughter was never in danger. Her nurses were attentive, helpful, friendly, responsive. I would have taken whiplashes from Satan himself if it meant my daughter getting care. The petty complaints and power play coming from the other side of the curtain didn't affect my child at all. The nurses had their number. They were handling it. They should have put that girl and her parents in a mobile bed in the hall, standard overflow for a packed ER. She was a non-emergency, and I'm sure there were people waiting who actually needed the space. For context, I have a son that was born when I was married to my first husband. I was young when he was born and his father was abusive to me. My ex-husband's mom was constantly in our lives, trying to take over and make my son hers. I left my ex when I was in my early 20s, and my ex MIL ended up taking my son into another state filing for custody. She went to a state that has grandparents' rights, as ours didn't. I fought her for years and ended up getting remarried to my current spouse, and we had a son together when I was in my mid-20s, a boy who is now 10. I see my oldest son only during the summer and holidays. I finally got the court case moved to our local court, and the judge said that I was wronged and ordered shared custody and visitation. My ex-MIL made a huge deal that son needed to stay with her during the week because of school, and the judge went with it so he could finish high school in an environment he was familiar with. My ex-MIL has ruined my son, just like she did her own. She's given him any and everything he's wanted and asked for. She's taught him no respect and kept him very sheltered. She literally jumps on people if they don't give him his way, so in turn, my son is loud, violent, and all around sad to be around. So he came up to visit during Halloween and showed his rear. Awful. My husband's mom lives with us, and she isn't well. She's doing chemo. She's been a big help with my youngest son, so that I could help my husband with our business. My youngest is a delight to be around. He's polite, funny, and respectful. We've taught him that you don't expect anything unless you work for it. I went and picked my oldest up, and his attitude started right away because his phone died, and the charger I had in the truck didn't fit his phone. He wanted me to get off the interstate and buy him an overpriced one from the truck stop or something. I told him no. I'd get him one when we got into town, and the next time he needs to remember to bring one for the house and the car. I suggested making a packing list ahead of time. Now my youngest was in the back playing with his tablet quietly, and my oldest realized that the tablet was plugged into a car charger. He asked his younger brother for the charger, and I told him it's an Apple charger. It won't work with your Android. My oldest said, "You don't know that. Shut up." Next thing I know, he's forcibly taken the Apple charger and is trying to fit it into his phone. When it didn't work, he threw it in the back seat of the truck. My youngest just plugged his tablet back up without a word, but I told my OS that his behavior wasn't acceptable. Fast forward to the next day. OS is still fuming at me because I made him wait, badmouthed me to his grandma, etc. I left to go to the office, as did my husband, and my MIL was going to take my youngest son to the treat trail for Halloween. She asked OS if he wanted to go, and he told her to kick rocks. My husband told OS not to speak to her like that. I knew trouble was brewing, I just didn't know how bad. Apparently, MIL and VS went to the treat trail as OS called MIL to tell her he wanted Hardee's, also known as Carl's Jr.'s. My MIL told him there was food at home and that it would be a while before she could get it. OS told her she needed to bring it now. My MIL told him that either eat what was at the house or wait. OS cussed her and hung up on her. MIL called me, and I told her not to reward bad behavior. I told her we had plans to go out anyway later to eat. He could wait. So when MIL gets home, she tries to open the door, and her key won't work. OS comes to the door and tells her he's angry and doesn't want her in the house, so he locked her out. He told her to wait outside until either he felt like opening the door or until I came home. My MIL told him to open the door ASAP. She called me crying, and I went the heck off. I called the OS and told him he didn't make the rules in my house. He went by them, and that he would be punished if he didn't open the door. He really thought I was playing. I left the office and went home. Cue disaster. I opened the door and OS was there on the other side. MIL and YS had been waiting in the car, and OS was blocking the threshold saying he told MIL to keep outside. That was her punishment for telling him no. I told him to move, now. I tried to push past him, and he pushed me back outside, threatening to lock us all out. I went to go inside again, and he put his hand on my face and pushed me back out. I told him, "That's it, I'm calling the police." He didn't think I was serious, but I did. I told the dispatcher that my OS was refusing to let me into my own home, and had put his hands on me. OS goes into a rage, and I mean a pure rage. He comes out the door screaming profanity and threats, tries to take my phone, and the lady tells me she'll send someone ASAP. I mean, I had to literally fight him to keep him from breaking my phone, and he goes after my youngest. He tells us that he hates him, and he's going to kill him because YS caused his life to be awful since he was born, and that OS should be the only one getting anything from me. OS said he was my true son since he was born first, from my first marriage. I don't know XMIL bullcrap. My MIL locks YS in her car, and OS proceeds to kick, punch, crack the windows and windshield in her car. OS goes after MIL just as my husband pulls up. He's telling MIL this is her fault, that she just needed to do what he said. My husband tries to restrain OS, and OS is screaming, "He'll have my husband arrested," etc. The police come and they immediately take over restraint on OS and put him into the back of the van. My husband and I explained the situation, and I told the officer that my ex-MIL shared custody. So the officer calls ex-MIL and tells her what's happening. He puts her on speaker and she immediately puts the blame on us, saying we provoked him and are abusive to him. The officer told her that it didn't seem to be the case as a neighbor had come forward and said she had called 911 also, plus had a security camera that showed the entire thing. ex-MIL jumps in saying the police here can't do anything with OS as he's a resident of another state. Blah, blah, blah. The cop tells ex-MIL that's not the case, and it seems like OS needs to learn he's too in control. The officer hangs up and ex-MIL immediately calls me. I put her on speakerphone. She's not the smartest, yet she thinks she is. ex-MIL said if I had OS arrested, that I would be a bad mom, and that he was justified in what he'd said and done. I asked her about the true son thing, and she said he was my only heir as he was my first son, and from my first marriage, and divorce is a sin. I told her that's not how it works. I told her I'm tired of him taking my home over and trying to hurt people. Long story short, he spent 3 days in juvie before a hearing, and the judge asked me what I wanted to do. So OS is being sent to a group home. My ex-MIL fought the entire way but had no hold because both officers and my neighbor gave statements. Now ex-MIL is saying I'm ruining his life and I'm a crap parent. She's also accusing my husband of abuse towards OS. Oh my God, you did the right thing. Your son is a threat to everyone in your house, and his grandmother is doing him no favors. Get him the help he needs. Don't abandon him. But don't risk your family's safety either. Well guys, that's it for today. If you end up enjoying this video, please consider subscribing. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, I'm gonna link it right here. The story is about an OP who saved a kid from drowning, and the dad who threatened to call the cops on OP. Check this out if you haven't, and I'll see you in my next video.